Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Star Trek Deep Space Nine review show. My name is Fletcher. About to say hello is Data.
Word up.
Today we're going to recap, rate, and discuss Season 1, Episode 8, Dax. Alternate title, Everybody But Dax. Talks about Dax.
It's a long title.
Yeah, not a very good one either. I wouldn't name a episode that, honestly. Alternate title, Law and Order Bejor.
Yeah, okay. That's a little better.
Alternate title, we tediously explain to you how Trill work. There will be full spoilers through this episode, and since we both have seen the whole series, possible accidental, minor spoilers for later in the show, but we will try to avoid that. This episode originally aired February 14th, 1993, which is Valentine's Day.
Oh, yeah, sure enough.
And you know what the Next Gen episode that aired?
No, I don't.
Before this, I guess technically it aired right after the last episode, because I think it's like just a day. But anyway, it was the one with Major Recall. I forgot even what the title was.
That's is that Enemy Mine? Or
it's like Face of the Enemy.
Yeah, Face of the Enemy. That sounds right. Yeah, Star Trek Next Generation, Season 6, Episode 14, Face of the Enemy.
Absolutely no connection that I can think of to this episode. Just thought I'd bring that up. Pretty cool episode. I like that one.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Deanna Troi going undercover as the Tal Shiar. Anyway, in this episode, we open with a station log from Cisco that informs us that O'Brien is away on Earth celebrating his mother-in-law's 100th birthday.
No Tal Shiar in this one.
No, that we know of. I mean...
Right, yeah, there could be some hiding around.
You know, the Tal Shiar are notoriously sneaky, so... Yep. Note, Rosalind Chow, who plays Keiko O'Brien, was 35 at the time this episode aired.
So, her mother would have had her when she was very old. Is that what you're going for?
I don't know, I'm just saying.
Oh, okay.
It just seems like, you would usually say, like, grandmother or something. Or we have another 100-year-old lady in this episode.
That's true. That hadn't occurred to me.
Who says that Dax is the age of her great-granddaughter. So, the whole point is O'Brien will not be in this episode. Leaving you to wonder to yourself, how long would it have taken you to notice that he wasn't in the episode?
Yeah, okay. True.
We cut to Dax and Bashir having coffee. Bashir continues his tedious attempted courtship of Dax with a level of forwardness that would get him fired from any present-day company or military.
Yeah, it's seriously like we're into sexual harassment territory where not only does he keep it up, he keeps it up with like super thinly veiled euphemism or whatever.
He's like, oh, I know what you should be doing in bed tonight, if you know what I mean.
It's like, I know better ways to keep you up all night. And I'm just like, dude. And then not only that, but he's like, hey, can I escort you to your quarters? And she's like, that's not necessary. And she leaves. He figures out in his brain how to turn that no into a yes, but she's like, not necessary, but not forbidden either. Yeah. So I was like, dude, that is wrong. Like, we have... I'm really glad that, I guess, future spoiler, they eventually found something to do with his character other than wannabe ladies' man, because it's getting really gross at this point.
We definitely need way less Bashir and Dax. Way more Bashir and Yarrick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even last episode, when he's, like, coming on to that Bajoran lady with his story about his medical school final, and it's just like... You need other character traits than like trying to hook up with all the ladies, because it's always like, I don't want to say cringeworthy. That's overplayed, but it really is.
Yeah. Dax does her best to look visibly preoccupied with work. We cut to some shadowy hooded figures watching them. Dax turns down Bashir's offer to escort her back to her quarters and walks home alone.
I gotta pause for a second. I think that this episode is the introduction of Ractigino, the Klingon coffee, which becomes a very big deal like throughout the series.
You know, it didn't even occur to me, because they were saying Ractigino, and I could have sworn they said it at Quarks or something before. But...
It's possible. This is the first time I remember hearing it, but I could have missed
it. If it is, interesting factoid. If not, just ignore it.
Yep.
In the corridor, the hooded figures attack Dax. Notably, they do not announce themselves as law enforcement, or present any warrants, or provide any explanation of what they're doing. They rip off her communication device so she cannot contact Cisco, proving their intention to keep their activities hidden from Federation officials. Luckily, Bashir, the world's biggest creep, shows up to harass Dax some more. He stares blankly at the scene for a second, then instead of immediately calling for security, tries to rescue Dax himself. Once again, the mysterious abductors do not identify themselves, and they fight him off, committing assault on a second Federation officer. The assailants drag Dax away. Back in Ops, Kira and Cisco examine a fault in the graviton generator, which we later learn is the result of Dax's kidnappers committing sabotage on a Federation-administered facility. The kidnappers carry Dax through the corridors of the station with all the skill and efficiency of a Mossad commando team arresting a Nazi war criminal. Along the way, they commit several acts of bypassing the station's lawful security procedures. Bashir finally calls in the kidnapping, and with some quick thinking and acting, Cisco, Kira, and Odo intercept and foil the kidnap attempt.
Yeah, I was so, Bashir, when you see this happening, you call security first, instead of, what he does is run up and hit a guy and fall over from the force of how hard he hit the guy. I don't think the guy touches him at all. Bashir hits him and then falls over. And then he gets beat on and knocked out or whatever. And I was just like, see, you suck. That's why you should have just called security instantly.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty clear demonstration of why this is like Dr. Bashir and not hand-to-hand combat specialist Bashir. Cisco arrives at the scene and meets the kidnapper leader, who introduces himself as a special envoy from the planet Claystron, and says this is all part of a unilateral extradition as allowed by treaty between the Federation and the Claystrons. It seems that Dax is wanted for murder.
And treason.
Even though Dax was never a citizen of that, whatever. We pan to Dax, who has a weird 1,000-yard stare that she will continue to have for the rest of the episode. Cisco blows a gasket at the mention of this so-called lawful extradition and orders Odo to arrest all of them for the above-mentioned crimes, which cannot possibly be covered by this treaty. No, actually, he doesn't do that, and we launch into the world's most boring trial episode in Star Trek history. It seems that, as Curzon Dax was good friends with a Claystronian general, and based on recent declassified evidence, is alleged to have sent a transmission that betrayed the general to rebels on that planet. Now his son, the special envoy, is determined to get justice at any cost. Odo, cleverly anticipating a legal proceeding, coerces Quark into making his bar available for the hearing. And on that scene, I was kind of thinking, this is actually kind of a sleazy thing for a cop to do.
Yeah. Okay. The first thing that strikes me is he's like, this is the only suitable place. And I was like, why is Quark's the only suitable place?
Because it's the only set big enough we have right now.
Yeah. And when I looked up, that was exactly the thing. It's like, they're like, we could have built a conference room set, and we did indeed later build a conference room set, but this was the one that we had at the time. I was like, in universe logic, it's like, you could have used a hollow suite, or if you didn't have a room, you didn't have to take over his whole bar. There's no reason for this.
Yeah.
And then, Odo has a really shady bit of business, it's kind of similar to what Cisco did in the first episode, except it's a lot more forceful. And I guess if there really are all of these, building codes or whatever, then I'm surprised that he's not enforcing them, I guess.
Yeah, no, he's totally making up these building codes. I mean, he doesn't even cite any code. He just says, that wall needs to move 5 feet. I mean, Quark would be like, well, what's the required distance for that wall? And he'd be like, 5 feet less than that. But yeah, I think, we can give it a pass because it's, Odo and Quark.
Yeah.
And, I think any shadiness on Odo's part is kind of, forgivable. in that situation because, it's not some random guy, it's Quark. Quark can handle it. Sisko visits Dax and tries to get her side of the story, but she won't talk. A 100-year-old judge shows up. So that's the second centenarian in this episode.
Yeah. And this woman, actually, she previously played a character in The Next Generation. If you remember, This is the wife of Kevin Uxbridge. I think her name's like Rashawn or something.
Oh. Is Kevin Uxbridge the guy on the planet?
Yeah, it's like him and his wife are the only ones that survive the destruction of the planet, and then it turns out that
it's just like there's like one little patch of habitable land, and they live on it. Yeah. The thing I was thinking of the whole episode is the guy who plays the general's son. Like, he's been on Star Trek before, but this is actually, I think, his first Star Trek appearance. Because when I looked that up, I was like, there's no way he was never on Star Trek before this. He must have been on Next Gen at some point. But I could not find that he had been on Next Gen before this episode.
I don't know. Who's that guy? I gotta find his name now.
His name's like Gregory Itzin or something.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, okay, there he is. Gregory Itzin, sure enough. So, he was first cast as either Wayland or McNary in the first season episode of The Next Generation, The Big Goodbye, but dropped out in favor of doing an episode of L.A. Law instead, something he later expressed regret for.
Oh. Did they not pay him well on L.A. Law or something?
Mm-hmm. So, did you...
I imagine his Star Trek residuals would be better than L.A. Law residuals.
Quite possibly. Okay, but where else have you been on Star Trek? Okay, so he's in another episode of DS9. He's in an episode of Voyager, two of Enterprise, as different people. But yeah, I guess this is his first appearance.
Because I was like, when I saw him, I was like, I swear this has got to be a guy who's been on a million, like, Star Trek episodes, but this was his first, so...
Well, he had a chance.
Yes, true. Well, welcome now to Star Trek. Gregory Itzin. So, a 100-year-old judge shows up to preside over the extradition hearing. Since the station is technically Bajoran, and in Bajoran space, the Federation Treaty would not apply. This, of course, would make the Clastronians instantly guilty of assault and kidnapping under Bajoran law, but that point is never raised.
I do really love the scene where this comes into it, though, where it's like Kira and Sisko are like kind of tossing back and forth, and it's like, and the Bajoran government is very like, what does he say? He's like, the Bajoran government, it feels very strongly or whatever, and he's like, I'm sorry, they do, and she's like, oh yeah, definitely,
yeah.
We do.
That was great. Yeah, I love their kind of like chemistry in this episode, to where I invented some headcanon that they must be doing it. Like, just casually.
Sure. Why
not? And also, one of the things I noted for this episode is we really need more Kira. Like, these early episodes are too light on Kira, I feel like.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, and she's really good. I also love the end of it where she's like, and so, yeah, you guys are allies of the Cardassians, and you must have gotten the station layout from them. So that not only compromises our security, but it also annoys us.
Yeah.
Like, we don't like you. We don't like your face or your friends.
How these guys are not in Bajoran jail, I do not understand. But, because the episode has to happen.
Right.
Anyway. The issue chosen by Sisko to debate during this hearing is whether Curzon Dax and Jadzia Dax are legally the same person, which is, with 100% certainty, a well-settled matter under Trill and Federation law.
I love that, like, he's like, Sisko tells security, like, go back and look through, like, all the records and see if there's ever been anything touching on this. And I'm like, once the Trill Society began using, like, these symbiotes, this would have been one of the first things that came up.
Yeah.
Like, this would be so long established at this point that it's ridiculous that you're trying to be like, no one's ever had this come up before.
Yep. However, although Sisko asks Kira to look for legal precedent, we never hear of any. She never even reports back.
Not that we
one
see.
Way or the other. I think she forgot.
We don't see Bashir report back. We just cut to him like giving his testimony about it. So
that's true. That's true.
It's funny because Bashir's like, well, I don't think there is any medical evidence, and then he comes and he's like, oh, there's totally medical evidence in the trial.
Yep. The hearing proceeds tediously through many boring witnesses, including a Trill diplomat, whom nobody bothers asking about the Trill legal tradition in this matter.
Yep, that guy's been in some previous Star Trek episodes, by the way. But
oh, really?
Yeah, but the thing about this whole episode, and is like the trial episode is, it's like a Star Trek staple at this point.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they're done really well, sometimes they're not done so well, and I think this one's probably kind of middle ground in the ranking of trial episodes. You've got like The Measure of a Man from The Next Generation at the very top, and then there's some really weird, crappy stuff in DS9, or not DS9, Voyager. That's probably down at the bottom or something. Yeah,
there's the one where the like quarter Romulan guy goes on trial.
Oh yeah, the drumhead. Okay, that's a really good point. That's not a great one.
I don't know. I kind of like that one. Where like Picard has to stand up to the
he does have a really good
bully
speech when he stands up to the that's a good
point.
I
mean, let Picard talk, and he'll fix it. Meanwhile, Odo goes to the planet Claystron to investigate the murder and to talk to the dead general's widow, who is played by an actor of caliber several levels too high for this episode. After we have had the concept of a Trill symbiote joining explained to us many times with many metaphors, Dax herself takes the stand. Finally, the general's son asks the only important question in the whole trial. When Jadzia agreed to join with Dax, did she understand that to mean taking on legal responsibility for the actions of the symbiote's past joined hosts? Before she can answer, Odo bursts in with the general's widow, who provides an alibi for Curzon. He was in bed with her. Thus, the matter is never settled, and the entire trial was meaningless.
The general's widow, also Data's mom, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking of her as Faraday's mom from Lost.
Makes sense.
Which I guess is a spoiler for Lost.
In case anyone was going to watch Lost and has not watched it, and will remember a certain character and that he has a mom.
Yeah, well, she gets introduced even before Faraday does, so... Because she was in that Desmond time travel episode. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Anyway, she's the lady who tells Desmond to not propose to Penny or something. Anyway, that's a different show. The episode ends with a tender moment between Dax and the widow, where the widow confides that the general was a traitor and got killed by the rebels without needing anybody's help. The widow offers her wish that Jadzia will live a long, happy life. The end.
See, I think this is one of the points that annoys me most about the episode, actually, is that it's been, in some ways, like a whodunit, where it was like, oh my gosh, did Curzon really do this stuff? And they really don't give you enough information, and then you get to the end, it's like, oh, by the way, it was that guy himself that sent the message, and then he got killed trying to betray everyone. And I was like, okay, well, that's kind of out of nowhere. Yeah. And I feel like that makes the whole thing more lame.
Well, I mean, they could introduce another character, but then we would immediately know that guy was the killer.
That's true. I feel like until the end, like, you're supposed to be like, maybe Curzon did it, and then when there's the moment where the widow is like, maybe it's time for my role to change. And it's like, oh my gosh, is she the one who like got her husband killed so she could be with Curzon? And then it's just like, oh no. It wasn't anyone that you thought about. It was the dead guy actually was responsible for his own death.
Yeah, it was as a mystery kind of lame, although I did enjoy seeing Detective Odo in action.
Yeah, he does some actual police work, which I appreciate. And you know what? It's even worse because the lady specifically mentions, it's like, there were 5 people, including my husband, who knew his route, and my son has established the whereabouts of all of them except Curzon. So the way you say that, the husband's whereabouts were also established, so they knew that he couldn't have been the one. And then it turns out, oh no, he was the one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe he's just operating under the logic the guy wouldn't kill himself.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it would be fine if you hadn't specifically called out. It's like, everyone, it's like, there were 5 people, and they've all been established except for Odo. And that includes, like, she specifically says, including my husband. And so I'm just like, well.
It's like, yeah, we established his location. He was at the phone where the call was made from. But it couldn't have been him. And did they say specifically that the transmission betrayed his route, or did they, like, just assume that?
I think they assumed that.
Because it was probably just him, like, giving away secrets like a dirty traitor.
Well, I figured it was him, like, being like, hey, meet me and I'll, like, give you information for money or whatever he was going for. Maybe he was, like, maybe he was theologically aligned with the rebels and he's like, meet me here and I'll go over to your side, or maybe he just wanted money. Who knows? But
that's another thing is, like, they kind of introduced this whole thing, but we never go quite deep enough into the politics of the situation, in particular what Curzon's, like, alignments might have been.
Yeah, he was a Federation officer here, apparently. So it's really weird that he is this involved in their internal conflict.
But we never hear, like, Curzon had sympathies with the rebels or anything like that to kind of, like, make us wonder even further what, why he might have betrayed the general if they were such good friends.
I mean, the guy doing the accusing doesn't seem to have a motive, and it's not until we find out about the affair that it's like, oh, well, here, hi, Mr. Motive, how are you?
Yeah. He's like, oh. Yeah, I mean, it's probably not good to have, like, the victim's son.
No, that really seems like a conflict of interest there.
Investigating, prosecuting, and, like, arresting in this case. But
yeah. So, one random fun note I want to mention before I forget about it. Apparently, there in Dax's quarters, there's a replica of the Fertility Idol from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh.
This is the only time it's seen in her quarters.
Interesting. I was noticing she has lots of flowers and stuff, and I was like, huh. This is an interesting decor in Dax's room. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about with this episode. Because my one memory of this episode was that, what's her name? Terry Farrell?
That is her name, yeah.
Yeah, my one main memory from watching this episode a long time ago was that her acting was really bad. But watching it, I now realize her acting was actually pretty good, but she, like, doesn't do anything for most of the episode.
Yeah, it's really weird to have, like, you don't get a lot of episodes that are named after people. And so it's very odd to have this one named after her and all about her, and she does almost nothing and says almost nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she has that one good scene with Cisco where they're kind of reminiscing, and she's just like, she's kind of mean, where at one point she's like, no, I'm not that same person. We're not friends. And he's like, what, really? We're not friends? She's like, no, of course we're friends. And I was like, then why'd you say that? That was rude.
Yeah, and I thought the scene between her and the widow was pretty okay.
Yeah.
Like, I liked it. I thought it was nice, when the widow, like, touched her cheek, and it was like, it was like, a lover, but also, an old lady wishing a young lady, like, a good life or whatever. I don't know. I thought it kind of worked. And, like, her reaction to it, I thought was pretty good. So, yeah, that's, like, one of the little gems, along with Detective Odo in this mostly... So, the episode starts off really exciting, but then when we get to the trial stuff, it just gets so... And especially, it's so frustrating, because this whole trial is pointless, because somewhere out there is the answer.
Well, and I don't understand really why... I mean, okay, so when you get to the end, they discuss how, it was really the general all along. And Dax doesn't seem surprised, so I assume this is something that they discussed at the time. Like, they figured this out at the time and discussed it with each other. So Dax knew who really did it. And I'm just like, why are you protecting the dead guy? Like, you're going to die to protect the dead guy? I mean, I understand, like, oh, I can't, I don't want to say my alibi because it would implicate, like, make everyone find out about this affair. And not only would that be bad for her, but I'm ashamed of it myself. Right. I mean, I guess you could have said I was with her, like, at her house. We were chatting, and, she could have been like, oh, yeah, totally. Dax was with me at my house. And then maybe there'd be suspicions, like, oh, did they have something going on? But it wouldn't be like, oh, no, she's definitely an adulteress or whatever. But you can, without providing your alibi, you can be like, well, no, it was actually him. And if you look at the evidence, you'll see that, like, whatever. And so I'm like, why are you so willing to die for that? And also, the widow knew all this was going to happen. They were going to go and arrest her, and she thought it was Curzon. But she's like, no, that's not going to be enough evidence to convict him of 2 death penalty crimes, right? No, I'm sure it'll be fine. I was like, really? You're just going to let the chips fall where they may on this one? That's kind of harsh.
Well, okay. I guess Dax probably had to have known that the general was a traitor. But I guess you can't really bring that up, especially since they, like, hammer home so many times, like, what a beloved hero this general is now.
Yeah.
On the planet. So I think maybe she just knows she just can't bring that up without it, like, blowing up in her face.
Well...
And she would have to, like, admit to the affair.
See... At the very least, to Cisco, could you not tell the truth? And then Odo's going to be there and investigating, and they could find some independent evidence if it exists or something. It's like, why are you not telling Cisco anything?
Yeah, that's a big problem. Except, I guess she's so incredibly ashamed of the affair or something. Yeah, it really doesn't make that much sense. Or yeah, like, at the very least, just tell Odo. Like, hey, look, I don't want to tell Benjamin because, he's a good friend of mine and, this is really embarrassing, but, like, here's what happened. And then Odo could have solved the case even faster.
Yeah, you're really kind of wasting Odo's time. And I do like Odo's willingness to, like, he's known Dax for a little bit, but unlike Cisco, he's like, I don't know, maybe she's guilty. How the hell do I know?
Yeah.
Or maybe Curzon was guilty. It's just...
Right.
It really does bother me on a deep level that they're trying to claim that this has never come up before and that there's no precedent. Now, it would have been real easy, I feel like, to be like, well, yeah, Trill Society says that the next toast is not responsible for the crimes of the previous toast or whatever. But the Klystrons don't agree to that. Like, that... Yeah. And the Bajorans don't necessarily have to agree to that either. So... It would have been, you could have done it and had it be the same, but make more sense.
Yeah, I think there's just several lapses in writing where they're like, well, either they didn't think of it or they just didn't want to address it or something. But yeah, you're right. They totally could have, like, been like, well, under our legal tradition, if a person is capable of remembering the crime and feeling guilt for it, then, like, they are responsible for the crime, or something like that.
Okay. So can we erase her memory and then she's innocent? Is that, like, the argument here?
That's kind of what I was thinking. Like, when that guy was making that argument, I was like, so could you just, like, take those memories and implant them into someone else? And then, like, convict that person for it?
Yeah, I feel like all of his arguments in favor of why she should be guilty are really thin. When you get down to it, and the argument about how, like, okay, the symbiote's guilty, if there was a way that, we would split them and kill the symbiote, that, I'm like, okay, I can get behind that. That makes sense. Any attempt to extend that and be like, we should also kill Jadzia, doesn't make any sense. It's like, he never comes up with any arguments that are in any way convincing to me that this woman who wasn't even born when the crime was supposedly committed should now be executed for it.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's like even I don't think you can hold the symbiote responsible, because it's like Cisco said. It's like when you mix the two things together, they make a new thing.
Yep.
And then when you separate them back out, and then you mix the salt with something else, it makes a completely different chemical.
Well, yeah, and I'm not saying that I necessarily agree that the symbiote should be guilty, but I'm saying that that is a perspective that I think I get, that I think they can argue potentially successfully, because even if the symbiote is not exactly the same person that it was when joined with Curzon, it was half of Curzon. It was half of
Right.
It was half of Curzon Dax. It was half of whatever made this decision to murder a guy and commit treason, supposedly. So it's like, I could see the argument there. I don't necessarily agree with the argument, but I could see the argument. I don't think there's any way that you can extend it to Jadzia, and the fact that the only way to execute Dax would also kill Jadzia, I feel like at that point it's like, well, why are we talking about this? Why is anyone entertaining the idea of murdering an innocent woman who everyone admits did nothing?
Right. And the guy makes the really annoying argument. Is like, well, you don't want this murder to go unpunished, do you? Where it's like, that's not how it works. You don't pick the... It's like, you punish the person who committed the murder. You don't, find the most closely
Yeah, like their
person.
son or something, because they're the nearest relative, and kill them because the guy's like, they would have you believe in the perfect Trill murder. All you have to do is
live out your full life, then die.
Is die, and then you're not guilty anymore. And I'm like, that's every murderer. Yeah. Every murderer, if they die, they escape punishment for the crime. So, your argument is stupid, and you are stupid.
Yep. Yeah. Yes, the guy is very stupid.
And I just love, it's the perfect crime. And I'm like, so really, is it the perfect crime for a regular dude if they kill somebody and then die of old age? And you're like, oh, he committed the perfect crime. Can't let him get away with it now that he's dead.
Yep, gotta implant his memories in someone else, then kill that person, or else they get away with it.
And it's also very strange. She brings up at the beginning, why did you wait 30 years to pursue this? And he was like, oh, well, it was the evidence was in some top secret military documents. And I'm like, so this guy's death sparked a movement to win the Civil War. Uh-huh. And nobody thought to investigate at the time. Nobody with the clearance to read these military files was like, hey, maybe we should see how they found out. Or whatever. Yeah. So it's just, there's so many logical lapses in this show.
You can kind of write that off as a plot convenience, but I guess we're just led to believe he got intercepted and killed or whatever. And then I guess they just figured the rebels got lucky or something. Yeah. And then later discovered this transmission, and they're like, wait a second. This transmission must have contained his root, and therefore whoever sent it must be guilty of murder. Yeah, even that's pretty flimsy.
I don't even think that's murder, now that you say that. I can see the treason if it was somebody who is a citizen of this nation or whatever. But that's not murder. That's maybe at some degree,
it's conspiracy.
It's conspiracy. That would be the thing.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that can make you guilty of murder, even if you didn't commit murder. Like conspiracy to commit murder is basically the same as murder, even if you didn't murder. And there's the felony murder rule, where if you were committing a felony and as a result somebody died, that is automatically a first-degree murder. And stuff like that. I'm not a legal expert, but I think that's how it works. If you were if you broke into a building and then as a result somebody, I don't know, tripped and fell and got killed. That's probably a bad example, but... let's see. Okay, so this is kind of because in A Man Alone, where Odo's case got solved completely unrelatedly by Dr. Bashir,
yep,
who just rushed in at the last minute and fixed everything. This is kind of like Odo getting his revenge. He's like, I will solve this. You guys have your stupid trial. I will solve it and bust in and just like into the episode. So I thought that was kind of a fun little turnaround.
Yep, Odo gets to be a detective and makes everything that they did pointless, which is funny because when Cisco suggests he go, he's like, there's 30 years of dust on this case. No one's going to accomplish anything doing that.
Yeah, well, apparently nobody bothered asking any questions or did any kind of investigation. So, luckily there was a lot of low-hanging fruit for Odo to grab.
Yeah, I like, he's like, I talked to everyone who knew them, and they were like, they were the best of friends. So if, like, Dax really did kill this guy, that's pretty cold. Like, why?
Yeah. And, like I said, they just didn't give enough context to, like, why would that even happen? People are just like, maybe he did it. But you're like, can you give me a little bit of, like, more why you would think that?
I also like that they established where everyone else was and, that everyone else had an alibi. And they never bother to ask Dax, like, do you also have an alibi? Can we establish where you are? They're just like, well, we checked the other 4 people on the list and they all did have alibis. So obviously Dax must be guilty.
Yeah, is that how police investigations work? It's like, check 4 alibis. Oh, process of elimination.
No need to investigate further. Please give us a warrant for this person's arrest. And the judge is like, all right, sure.
Yep, it's like, yeah, that's a very poor police procedure. I mean, this guy calls himself Special Envoy. I mean, it's not quite clear what his even job is or position in the government. I mean, he kind of acts like a police officer, but I don't know. He could just be some guy like, I want my father's killer now.
Whoever administered signed off on the warrant for an arrest that could, of a Starfleet officer in Bajoran territory, this is something that could potentially start a war between your planet and 2 other powers. And you're just like, yeah, okay.
Several things they do, I believe, are acts of war. Like, they sabotage the tractor beam.
Yep.
They assault Starfleet officers. I mean, yeah, it's incredibly irresponsible. Yeah, I don't know what kind of judge would be like, whoa. And also, like, how did they get such a favorable treaty with the Federation? Where
they have a mutual extradition treaty. I guess that's not necessarily a favorable thing.
I guess, but it says it allows for unilateral extradition, meaning they can go in, grab the person, and leave without telling anybody.
Yeah, I'd never heard the term before, so I was like, I guess I'll have to look this up.
Well, I don't know if there's any treaty that really grants that, because even, countries that we have extradition treaties with, you still have to have at least, a police officer with you from that country when you go arrest that person. And then, but of course, this, there's no way that this falls under any kind of legal extradition. They committed, many felonies. I can just imagine somebody coming into America, assaulting our police officers, deliberately trying to, keep what they were doing away from the proper authorities.
Yeah, and in my mind, from their perspective, it was like when, in The Dark Knight, when Batman goes and grabs the guy out of China and just brings him back.
Sure.
And it's like, oh, once he's here, we don't care how he got here. But then they're like, no, our treaty says that we're allowed to do this. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's probably just like, okay, we got her here. We can put her on trial now.
But they had the whole thing pretty well planned, except for the fact that they just jump her in a random hallway when there could be other people around. They have so much in place and so much prepped that I was like, surely there's a better moment to, grab her. Come on.
Yeah, and that was something I was like, wow, these guys are, really well prepared. I guess the Cardassians gave them something to bypass all the security force fields.
Yeah.
or
They
whatever.
said like they had codes or something. I was like, but wouldn't the Cardassian codes have been changed? I don't. Although I guess on the other hand, it's like, did your ship not have a transporter? You could have just walked up and been like, okay, transporting, and then gone.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's a good point too. Or, they could have put like a transporter armband or something on her, transporter booster or something to like, yeah, that would have been a better plan. But then they would have gotten away, and that would have been no good. So we can't have that. Yeah, but bottom line, there's no way what they were doing is covered by whatever provision is in that treaty. Oh, another thing I wanted to say is, like, I don't know what the purpose of this episode is. I think it's just to establish what it means to be a Trill.
I mean, I think we knew that they had to do this at some point because there's the one Next Generation episode that features the Trill, and they also look very different there.
Right.
And you can put one in Riker for some reason, and that's all good, which also doesn't make any sense. But I think we knew that at some point you had to have the episode that's like, let's examine being a Trill a little bit. And honestly, you eventually had to have an episode where it's like, oh, one of her former hosts did something and someone wants revenge on her for it in some way. Like, that is a low-hanging fruit that they were going to grab at some point. There's no way that you cannot. You
can just imagine the writers having a brainstorming session, and that idea is going to come out.
Yeah.
Like, and they're just like, oh, yeah, that's a good one. And then they're like, oh, what do we want to do this week? It's like, oh, let's do the Dax murder thing.
And it was about time that Dax got some attention in an episode. She's been kind of off to the side through most of the series so far. So I can see the draw of going ahead and doing this, getting in a way getting it out of the way so that we understand the Trill and what's going on a little better as we progress.
I mean, it would have been nice to do that in a way that involved Dax herself a little more.
Exactly. Like, let Dax actually...
let her build that character with her performance.
Yes.
Like we've been doing with Odo, like we've been doing with Kira.
With even with Cisco.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the O'Brien episode with Tosk, we kind of talked about how he doesn't get an arc or anything. He doesn't get to change, but at least he gets to like be active.
Right.
So it's like we're going downhill in terms of character exploration. Like, we started out in the second episode or third, whatever, with the excellent Kira one.
Right.
And then it was like, we got the Odo one, which was like, this one's not as good. We got the O'Brien one where I was like, well, he doesn't, I mean, he doesn't go anywhere. And then we get the Dax one where not only I guess we get some insight into her, or almost actually more insight into Curzon than her.
Yeah.
But she doesn't talk for the majority of the episode. It's like they're regressing in.
Yeah, I feel like weird. Most of what we learn about her, we get through like Cisco in his several scenes where he talks about Curzon. Yep. And I thought his that stuff was done pretty well. Where he, you can kind of almost get a sense of this person by the way Cisco talks about him.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he goes to Dax is like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was fun. I'm a different person now, though.
I like how low-key Cisco was trying to argue during this hearing that Curzon was not a murderer and did not kill this guy. And people were like, okay, but that's not what that's not the point of what we're doing here. Yeah. Like, we're arguing this completely other thing. And he's like, yeah, I know, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. It's like, no, the legal point is Jadzia and Curzon the same? It's like, we've already decided 100% that Curzon is guilty with no evidence. So don't even bother.
But I gotta say, I loved the Arbiter, and I want her back for like any trial things that come up because she's so sassy and fun.
Who doesn't love a good sassy old lady?
Yeah, exactly. She's excellent. She's talking about like her grandkids and stuff and just putting people in their place. Like, no, I'm not sitting here taking this shit. Don't waste my time with superfluous language. I'm too old for that. I want to be here till supper, not till senility.
Like, every time it got too intense, she just like called a recess I imagine to go, like, watch her soap operas or something and, like, calm down from the annoying trial. Yep. It would be great if there were just, like, tons of trial episodes and she kept coming back. She's like, what is it this time?
You guys, I'm always up here doing this stuff.
Like, why is I gotta get off this circuit? This is the worst.
They really should have, like, a judge on the station, I feel like. Because, I mean, obviously it wouldn't be a character that you need to use all the time. But it's just, like, anytime... People get arrested here a lot. Is what I'm saying. And so there should be somebody to deal with these. I don't know. Do they have to send for a judge from Bajor, or do they send the criminals to Bajor?
I think the normal procedure must be to send them to Bajor, because they mentioned the reason they're holding it there is they don't want to risk removing Dax from the station.
Right.
So...
Which is, it's a good plan, given what just happened.
Yeah. So, I think normally what must happen is that the courthouse that has jurisdiction over Deep Space Nine or something is on Bajor. And once Odo finishes processing them, he just ships them off there. But I don't know, that's just a guess.
I feel like we could have used maybe some, like, random Quark showing up and being like, are you guys done yet? Or, like, just... something else, because we lost O'Brien. Bashir, after he gets the crap beat out of him, doesn't have much to do. We don't. I mean, like you said, Kira gets sent off with this task that she never comes back from, basically, and so it feels very limited what we're experiencing here.
That would be great if, like, there's a post-credit scene and it's like Kira on the planet Trill, and it's like this, like, Trill, like, legal expert is explaining to her, like, all the nuances, and she's just sitting there, like, trying to take notes, and she's like, It's like, and then in this case, it was established that the symbiote could be held responsible if it met these conditions. She's just like, this is the worst.
I do like that, like, apparently the Trill planet, just really fast, got another joined Trill onto a ship and out to Deep Space Nine. It's like, this is going to be a thing.
The Claystrons brought that guy.
Did they?
Remember, he was the guy who identified Dax at the very beginning.
Oh, was he? Okay. Because, I just like, the judge calls it out. It's like, it is very convenient that you're here. Why exactly? And he's like, well, the Trill... government or whatever felt that since this case involved one of us that they wanted a representative here or some crap.
I don't know. I was pretty sure he was the guy at the beginning.
But yeah,
was like,
you're right. It says he identifies Dax before her abduction.
So
I guess the Trill government already knew that this was going to happen, which means that being that they're a member of the Federation also already knew. I think this guy was kept in the dark about what was going on, is my read on it. Because there's no way he would just, like, aid in the arrest and abduction of another Trill, right? I don't know.
Unless he just sucks at, like... Because he's a Trill... He's like... they call him, not an ambassador, but something like that.
Yeah, he was a minister of the Trill government.
Okay, yeah, so... Yeah, there's no way, like, an American ambassador would go out with some foreign cops and be like, there's my citizen.
You would hope not, yeah.
Go arrest him. So I think there must have been this whole thing we didn't see where they bamboozled him into thinking something else was going on or something. And, I mean, during the trial, he doesn't seem to really act like what's going on is very important. So
yeah, he's really kind of like deadpan the whole time, more or less, and he's just like, like each side that's asking him questions, he's mostly just like, no, yeah, you're right, yeah, I mean that's right.
So I think they just must be like, oh, hey, we need you to come explain to these people how being a Trill works. Just don't worry, just do it.
So yeah, there's a lot of weird... I guess you want to move into ratings. I feel like I'm going to have to rate now.
Okay. What do you want to rate it?
See, I originally, coming in here, I was thinking like lieutenant or lieutenant junior grade, and the more we've talked about it, the more like logical flaws and like deep problems I'm seeing with the episode. So I think I'm gonna make this an ensign.
Nice. Full lowest we can go.
Yep.
So far.
Yeah, I mean, are we gonna be able to have like a 0 pips rating or a half pip? I mean, I think according to the listing of ranks, like the half pip indicated like chief petty officer or whatever at some point. I assume that O'Brien wore a half pip at some point.
O'Brien has the half pip right now, but
does he? Okay.
Later, yeah, because I noticed that, like, you know. But later, I swear he gets a different thing. That's like a little, I don't even know what you call it.
Yeah, I think it does change later. I feel like that was not the case for too long, or maybe I just missed it. But yeah, so I guess we could have that come in eventually if we need it.
Yeah. So just thinking about our rating scale, where the line is between lieutenant and lieutenant commander, and so lieutenant is just barely under the line bad. This is the way I've been thinking about it. Lieutenant junior grade is solidly bad, and then ensign is just like bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so. The thing about this episode that's just never happened on an episode before is it made me actively mad at some points. Like, there can be flaws with an episode that like annoy you or like they bore you or something. But I was like, how is this bad or this stupid? But there are a few gems in the episode. And I feel like once Terry Farrell is given a chance to act, which is not very much, she does okay. I feel kind of bad for her. And I still kind of want to save that ensign.
Okay.
Because, it's just, well, I gotta reconsider now. I know, I think I gotta save it. So I'm gonna call Lieutenant Junior grade, but I imagine it's going to be on the low end of those. Because yeah, like my main flaw with it is just, I mean, besides all the annoying stuff we talked about, is it's just so boring when it gets to the trial. And it's like, I'm so sick of like, because it is an interesting concept, like how does being a Dax or how does being a Trill work and all that stuff. But it's just like a trial was not the correct way to explore that, I feel like. Or
yeah, you're probably right. And then I didn't even think about it until you started talking about the trial being boring. But I think a point that bothered me that I hadn't even been able to articulate until now is that once again, like, the interesting story here is the one that happened 30 years ago. Like, and worse than that, this time, the interesting story is mainly between two characters that we have not met and will, in all likelihood, never meet now because they're both dead, is the General and Curzon. Like, that's where the story was. And it's not this story. This is the really boring thing that happens 30 years later. So, yeah, it's just...
I mean, I think the correct way to handle this would have been to have Dax fall back in with, like, a group of people that Curzon was involved with, in that past life. And they're having trouble, like, getting that Jadzia and Curzon are not the same person, or something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
And I don't know if I said this, but I feel like with the exception of that Kira episode, like, the best character development comes from not your own episode, I feel like. Because I feel like the best Odo stuff has been in Not a Man Alone. like in the other episodes. And I think this is kind of the same way where I think like what episode was it where Keiko started the school? Well, whatever episode it was, like there's these little beats where Bashir is hitting on Dax as usual, and he's a little jealous of Cisco, but Cisco is going through his own stuff with Dax, still trying to figure out, like, how much of this is Curzon and how much of this is a new person or something. And I felt like just like the little tiny beats we had there were just as good, if not better, than any scene in this episode.
Yeah.
Except maybe, the parts where, Cisco talks about Dax or Curzon and what Curzon meant to him and stuff like that. But I don't know, just a little thought that, like, it seems like the writers are not good at hitting a target dead on right now in terms of character development. Yeah. It's like you kind of want to be like on the side, like being just gradually developed.
I don't disagree with this necessarily.
Okay, so those are our ratings. Lowest episode of the season so far for both of us. I don't think it'll stay in that position forever.
Oh, there's so many amazing things coming out.
There's just, like, I don't want to try to anticipate too much, but it's just there's some stuff coming up that's it's hard to put out of my mind. But anyway, yeah. So, any final thoughts?
No, I think I've beaten this one as much as I can beat an episode.
Yeah. So, I guess that does it for us today. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. I'm Fletcher. About to say goodbye is Data.
Peace.
Have a wonderful day, and drop by anytime you're feeling homesick.